All right, I think we can go ahead and start. Let me share my screen real quick, and we'll dive into it. Uh, all right. So today we're talking about server-side tracking for multi-domain websites. Essentially, what we're going to discuss is how you can utilize one server container or one container pair, server plus web, to pretty much do tracking on multiple websites. I am your speaker today, as usual. My name is Dan. I'm accompanied by my two esteemed colleagues who will be answering your questions in Q&A until we switch to live Q&A towards the end of the session. So again, while I'm talking, feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A, and these two guys will respond quick enough. Obviously, as usual, you're going to get a follow-up. You're going to get a webinar recording and some written guides and links to articles that are relevant to the subject matter of this webinar. So if you're late, if you couldn't attend or anything, don't get discouraged. You'll have a chance to catch up. So session outline. We're going to talk briefly about when do we want to use multi-tenant containers, centralized containers instead of separate containers, and what could be the cases for that. Then we'll briefly go through the Stape solutions that kind of empower you to do that and help you do it effectively. And of course, there's a live demo where we're going to go through a couple of cases. I'm going to show you a multi-domain setup. I'm also going to touch briefly on cross-domain tracking. And of course, towards the end of the session, we have a Q&A as usual, where some of the questions that were not answered in the chat, I will be addressing live. So multi-domain server-side setup in a nutshell. When to use GTM containers. I narrowed it down to three cases. So first and foremost, the basic one is when you have localization, but you run it on different domains. Let's say you have example.com, you have example.es, you have, I don't know, example.uk, but they are all the same website in principle, and the flows on them are the same, and you can expect that any flow of the user and any tracking requirements are the same. So that's the first and foremost easy example. Different domains but the same niche. So you may have non-related brands, non-related websites, but if they share a code base, and again, if they have similar tracking requirements, one versus the another, that could be another case where you would consider a multi-tenant container. And lastly, if we have any agencies out here, essentially this enables you to build kind of a low-key solution for anyone who cannot afford or maybe is hesitant to try server-side tracking yet. Because essentially you could onboard, I would say roughly 10-ish plus, depending on your situation, people in a single container pair without any interference one versus the another, and effectively track their conversions, track their events and such. So those are the three cases that I think are most relevant for such an approach. So again, just some pictures for you. So this is our normal setup. We have a data layer, web GTM, server GTM. That's our normal situation. So in order to do this, we expect the same container pair, web and server, to be digesting multiple data layers. By default, the expectation would be that these data layers are the same so that we don't have to go too deep into customization and exceptions. So on this picture, consider that three data layers represent three websites, but with a similar structure, with similar format of said data layer, right? So then we add multiple subdomains to our server container because, again, we still want the first-party context at all times. Each website on their individual domain will have their individual tracking subdomain. And there's some logic that we're gonna add to the containers just to route all of these things properly to pretty much get the result that we're looking for today. How Stape helps in all of this will be evident during the live demo, but to briefly guide you through things. So obviously there's the multi-domain power-up that we offer, which enables you to add multiple subdomains to a single container entity. There's thresholds depending on the plans. Multi-domain is available from the business plan, and going further up the chain, the amount of custom domains you can point to a container increases. On custom plans, it's infinite. Stape Store, obviously, the good, the old, the beloved, I hope. NoSQL database, which we will use as a hot storage for things that we need in order to achieve in this particular situation, cross-domain tracking. This has nothing to do with multi-tenant. This will mostly be used for cross-domain. Cookie restore tag. Again, this is our weapon of choice for cross-domain, and today I'll be showing you how we set it all up. This is a SGTM template, obviously. Multi-zone SGTM container hosting is something that we just wanted to show you guys. This doesn't really have to do anything with the setup that we're going to do today, but just to mention that we are currently offering the multi-zone containers. That is that the request you're sending towards them will be handled by the closest zone, by the fastest zone, right? And this makes a ton of sense for like big international shops or websites, doesn't matter, where you run everything on a single domain. Again, doesn't really apply to the subject matter, but it's kind of related, so I thought we should mention it just for everyone's knowledge. All right, with slides out of the way, let's just go ahead and switch to the demo. Let me see what we got today. So I will have my Stape container, of course. I will have a single GTM, server GTM, a single web GTM, and I will have two websites. I have my Stape events, and I have this Stape beer. If you want to crack jokes about Stape beer, go ahead. Right. So, quick disclaimer: both websites are on WordPress, and we are not discussing today how to implement Stape on WordPress. We're assuming that you can achieve that. We've covered that a lot of times. There's articles, there's previous webinars and such. In general, I have two WordPress websites. I have Stape plugin installed into them. I have my GTM containers embedded there, and I am using the WooCommerce container template that we are distributing on our GitHub. So anyone could achieve this state of a container pretty much in a couple of minutes. So we can start from if you're going to replicate this, you can start from the same, from the same starting point. So yeah, that being said, we have Stape events and we have a Stape beer. I have mocked this button here, which will redirect me to Stape beer. This will be our cross-domain situation. We're going to talk about that. But before that, let's consider a few things, and let's do that pinch of logic, which was promised and added to the containers. So let's take a look. First and foremost, on Stape, I need my multiple subdomains because right now I only have a subdomain for my main website, which is Stape events. So let's add a new one. I'm going to go ahead and use the same naming just because I can, but of course this is arbitrary. This doesn't really matter. So we're going to go Stape beer, and I will add this manually. I will not go for CDN. This is good enough for the purposes of this demo. So we need to add a CNAME record to this. So let me go to my Cloudflare, add it here. And we want a CNAME, of course. All right, make it not proxied, and our root would be Copia, like this. Okay, hit save. Boom. While that's propagating, let's hit verify button here. It can take us a couple of minutes. That's not instant, but this is good enough for us to start. We can consider that the subdomains are in place. By the time we get there, it will be verified. Now, let's look at our web container first and handle some basic things. So first and foremost, what we want is requests from Stape events to go to Stape events subdomain and requests from Stape beer to go to Stape beer subdomain, right? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to find in our templates the server container URL, which is plugged in into our data tags and GE4, obviously. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this variable to not be a constant, but to be a lookup table. And actually, to make things probably even easier for you, let's use a custom lookup table, the so-called advanced one, because that will be just a little bit more user-friendly. Give it a second to load. All right, and this is called advanced lookup table. Same principle, only gives you a little bit more of flexibility. Okay, so now we have that. So we want to change this constant to our advanced lookup table. Where are you? So unique command. Oh, this is it. Yeah, of course. Okay. All right. The reason I'm using this one is because this gives you this drop down there rather than the standard lookup table where you have just a strict match available, right? So now we need to figure out what it is we're mapping towards. So one of our things will be, of course, the existing subdomain, which we already have, which was in our variable originally. So we're going to go cornucopia, Stape, events, right? And then the second one will be the same, but for Stape beer. And I'm probably doing something wrong, which is this. Apologies. So we're going to return the subdomains. We're going to see if something matches something. So what we're going to do normally, and that's, I think, the easiest way, is we can look at something standard like a page location or a page host name. Let's be funky and just do page URL. Is that good enough? That good enough. And we can say if that contains, again, let's not build crazy logic. If that contains Stape events, we're going to return this URL. If that contains Stape beer, we can even do something like this, I guess, just to be safe that these combinations are not somewhere in the middle of a string. So if we do something like that, and put page URL here, if you want to assign a default, if that like fits your situation, you might. Let's rename constant to lookup table, and this should work for us. So we can launch a quick test and just see what's going on. Let's launch it on Stape events and figure out what it is that we got here. So let's say done ready. And where's our server container URL? This is a lookup table now. So let's see. Undefined. Something is not right. That's okay. That always happens. Let's figure it out. This is a lookup table. We're dumping page URL contains Stape events, contains Stape beer. We're returning those things. Why are you not working? Let's check. We want to look at the page URL variable, which is the standard one. Here, Stape events. And it did not caught. That's interesting. That's fun. Okay, so we have Stape events in the URL, right? This is a string. This is a proper variable, but for whatever reason, this says contains, this says contains, HTTPS. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, let's try again. Always funny when the first thing you try breaks. Be gentle with me, guys. Okay, let's do that again. What do we got? Let's look at the tags maybe, actually. This one succeeded. The settings variable has nothing. Which about here has nothing. Yeah, okay. All right. I'm a little bit surprised. Again, page URL is here.
Then you may
Yes.
check the Q&A because there are a lot of people who are willing to
Ah,
help. Yeah,
yeah,
just check.
guys. Thank you for that. I'm just not looking there. So concentrated on screwing this up. Okay. Q&A. Let's see what you guys got going. Ed Woo. Oh, you're at Woo. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Listen. Yes, of course. The simplest. I'm just a dummy. Okay. Thank you, guys. This was kind of obvious. Kudos to you. Okay, cool. We can relaunch this and we'll have our thing. Of course, right. I'm using a subdomain. I always forget that. So let the magic happen. I think it did. So we have our page URL, and then our lookup table has returned the proper subdomain, which matches, right? Obviously, if we were to launch the same on Stape Beer, just real quick, just to complete the cycle, without Woo though, this is on root. We will have the same situation. This is our Stape beer, and our lookup table has returned the correct subdomain. So one mission is achieved, right? We're using this single web container embedded on both websites, and it will always report to the correct server container, which is wonderful, which is like a big chunk of what we have to do. Then you may, and this depends entirely on your situation, you may have different pixels or different GE4 IDs or anything like that, based on your websites. So you would use a similar approach. I'm not gonna spend time on it right now, just so that we have more for Q&A. So we would go to your metapixel ID, for instance. You would switch it to a lookup table as well, and you could assign a URL or page host name, whatever, to a particular pixel so that a proper pixel is returned on each page, right? I'm not going to assume that today because we're going to look into a cross-domain scenario where we will kind of need the same GA4, but in principle, you can achieve it. So any of the variables that are constants, that are IDs that you have, you can switch them to lookup tables, grab the IDs dynamically, therefore always supplying the correct thing. Same principle for the server container, right? It's if you have different destinations, you don't have to do nothing for GE4, by the way. GE4 will inherit everything you send from the web. So if you have multiple GE4 IDs, you only have to handle it on the web container. On the server container, let's say you have different Google Ads destinations or the aforementioned pixel. Again, you would do the same thing. You would create a lookup table, only here on the server, we need another variable. So let's go through that real quick. All right. And we have the same thing here, advanced lookup table. Very same principle. So let's switch, for instance, our Meta API token from the constant to advanced lookup. And again, we don't have we don't have the standard parameters here, right? But we can do something from the event data. And if we have page location, good enough. And if that contains, and again, we will go for woo, Stape, events, for instance, right? And then the same here for Stape beer. And this is your CAPI 1, this is your CAPI 2. I think the principle is pretty much evident at this point. Only be careful with these things, not to screw anything up. Right. Same principle, once we receive a request, based on where it's coming from, we're going to get a proper pixel ID 1 or 2. So let's go ahead and just take a look at that real quick. So that's explicitly shown. I'm sorry, I need to launch it on a different, I need to launch the preview in a different domain. So let's actually do this. You can add multiple. So we're gonna do this. And of course the same for beer. Now we can easily choose where we're launching our preview via means of this. So let's launch events for now. Let's refresh a page here so that we get some sort of hit to our server. Oh, this was Stape beer, sorry. We can actually just do it like this. No, I want to do preview, sorry. Let's close this up. And let's do preview on events. So woo state events. Right, so we have our data tag firing here towards the correct URL, so we should see it here. And of course, it never works in a webinar. There's a page view from GE4. Again, kind of evidence that we actually did our thing correct, but to show you the pixel, we need an actual hit from the data tag to show up. So let's open some sort of page again. And there we go. Let's say view item. This has failed, obviously, because we provided dummy tokens. But if we look into what we got here, our token here is CAPI1, right? Which we assigned to Stape events. Obviously, you would plug in the normal KPI token, and there you go. You have your Facebook reporting. It will return back cookies properly because it sits behind the needed subdomain and of course, report to the correct pixel. This applies to everything, obviously, not only pixels, GE4, any sort of destination you have. If your websites share them, share the destinations, share the type of business, most of the time we see this in e-commerce, you can kind of build this logic here. and have all the destinations, have all the subdomains and such always be dynamic depending on the input. Right. Now, some words of caution, I think. Multi-tenant containers are just that, multi-tenant. So you have to always consider the fact that any change you apply will be applied to, across the board. Of course, you could consider doing some filters and sets of tags for different, what do you call them, customers for different websites. But at some point, you would run into interesting situation where you will run out of container space, especially on the server container, because what you get is 200 kilobytes. So if we imagine, I don't know, 20-ish something websites with multiple different destinations and sets of tags rather than dynamic destinations, you will just run out of the space really, really quick. So be mindful of that. You don't want to apply it just blindly. And at some point, you want to consider further maintenance of this, right? So when opting in for this multi-tenant approach, you also want to forecast a little bit into the future and kind of expect how probable it is that the websites that share the container will be changed individually. How probable it is that, I don't know, Stape Beer will become a different platform with a different data layer or maybe with a different flow, and they will not share enough similarities with the original website, right? That's always a consideration because there's a breaking point where the multi-tenant becomes there's like diminishing returns. You're getting more maintenance problems, you're getting more maintenance of exceptions, individual updates for every tenant, and it becomes a mess essentially. And you start thinking about, oh, I really want to go to individual containers where everything is encapsulated, there's no overlap, and there's no madness of exceptions and specific one-click events for just one site but not the other. So be very mindful of that. But in principle, like I said in the slides, you can even use it as a kind of a solution. You can onboard customers into a single system without ever exposing like the GTM to them. Give them the custom loader with an appropriate domain for each one. Suddenly they are all in server-side tracking, and you control it all from your GTM. Of course, depends on the nature of your relationship with those customers, the architecture of your relationship and such, but it is possible. We have seen people do this. We did this a little bit ourselves as well. So this is speaking from experience. Uh, right. All right, guys. Now that we are done with the multi-domain, let's really quick look into cross-domain and what we can do about it. Quick disclaimer, the only cross-domain situation we're going to discuss today is essentially a straightforward journey from domain A to domain B. The assumption being you land people on domain A and then you want them to convert on domain B. There's a ton of scenarios where this can be happening. So I think that's very commonplace, and that's what we're going to look at today, right? Because I'm not going to dive into magic of like just stitching users across different websites. We're not going to use third-party cookies or anything like that. What we're going to look at is how we can move a cookie from one domain to the other using server-side tracking. So the means to do that, let's just discuss the overall principle, right? So we will, upon going from domain A to domain B, pass something in the URL to the domain B, so-called stitching agent or something, some sort of a shared ID. And that shared ID will be our ID, that our kind of key to look up the cookies that we would have saved in Stape Store before going and doing that click. And that's exactly what we're going to do today, right now. And the quick thing also, I'm going to cheat a little bit and I'm going to use GA4 for this first section of what I said, right? For passing a common parameter from site A to site B. Again, I want to say GA4 is not the only way to do that. It's just a very accessible way, very straightforward one, and it saves me a lot of time showing you this today. But if you are in a situation where you cannot do this with GA4, let's say you don't share GA4 properties across those two domains, you can still achieve it with some sort of a custom script. which again, put a proper prompt into your favorite LLM, ask them the following: I need to append a certain parameter to the target URL of a certain button, and it will spit out some JavaScript that you can use to do just that. Your common parameter can be anything, some sort of cookie. In this instance, that's not really were you to use a custom thing, that's not that important. So let's use GE4 though, because we are cheaters, like I said. So in GE4, I will go to my data stream and I will say configure text settings like this. And in here we have configure your domains. So what I did is I've included Stape events and I've included Stape beer. And I'm sure the audience knows is this is cross-domain linking configuration, right? So now whenever we go from this domain to this domain or vice versa, there will be cross-domain linking. Google is expecting that we're running the same GE4 across the two. That is actually the case with us because we've done that for the sake of our multi-tenant setup. So now what happens is when I press on this button that I mocked, if we click Gimme Beer, we go to State Beer and you can see this huge parameter in the URL, which is _GL, stands for Google Linker, I believe. And inside that, you have your GA cookie. You have your, you might also have like your FPLC cookie and some other server-side stuff, but GA is good enough. Just don't get alarmed if the string is longer. What this does is we will have a cookie set on our destination website, the GA cookie. You can see 7444, which is exactly the same that our original website has, 7444. And this is the courtesy of this, of this service, of this linker thing. So now, just by adding these domains here, we have achieved the first part of our cross domain. We are now passing a shared ID when we're coming from website 1 to website B, right? Like I told you here, which is amazing. This ends up with us having the same GA cookie, which will be our key for our restoration efforts. So let's put it into practice. What we need to do is we need to set up a click event, right? We need to track the fact that we click that button in order to use it as a trigger for saving our cookies in Stape Store. So I'm going to launch the preview real quick on my Stape events to see what happens in GTM when we do that click on that button so that we can create our trigger. So let me just click that. And if we do it, we have our link click. Beautiful. And in our link click, we have a native parameter called click URL, which is obviously Stape beer, and we know that. So what we can do is the following. We can create a trigger, and that will be a link click, right? So I have actually already created it here, but let's take a look, right? So this is just click, go to Stape beer. We're looking at click URL, that native parameter, and when we want it to contain Stape beer, and this is our trigger. So let's go ahead and apply to some tag. We're going to use a data tag to pass it to the server. So the easiest thing to do for me is just to copy the existing page view. And let's call it something recognizable like this. Of course, rename the event itself and apply a proper trigger. Our click go to Stape beer, right? Makes all the sense. Okay, now our server container will receive a hit when we do this click. And we don't need to pass cookies or anything like that explicitly because, of course, we are getting them in the headers. So I will actually go ahead and publish this. Add outbound click event, let's say. This will be good enough. All right. Okay. Now, let me close the redundant tabs. I think they might influence us a little bit. Anyway, okay, so now let's look at the server. We obviously need to grab that event first and foremost. So let's see if I have a proper trigger for this. I don't. So let's copy something that already exists, like this page view. And let's do outbound click, right? Is it outbound click though? Let me double check because I've already made a lot of blunders today. So what do we have here? Didn't I just publish this? Oh yeah, of course. Here it is with a typo. Outbound click. Right. Okay. So let me copy this. And we're going to use it here. Outbound click, client name contains data client. This is our standard thing. So boom. Now, what we're going to fire on this event is cookie restore tag. This is a gallery template. You guys can find it in the gallery easy, available to you. So let's go ahead and create something. I have a whole dedicated folder for this here. So let's create that tag. We want to do cookie restore. We're going to use Stape store, obviously, but if you want, you can use Firebase. That's an option. We are going list of identifiers, right? So I don't know, let's say GA, or I don't know, maybe let's say GA, no underscores. And we want to give it a value of our GA cookie, and that would be, we need to create a variable for that, right? So let's, oh, I already have it, cookie GA, yay. This is a native cookie variable. I'm going to show it to you in a second, right? So this is our identifier. This is our key. And there's a list of cookies that need to be restored or stored in this specific case. So let's use the Facebook click ID as a dummy example. Let's give it some lifetime and assign that outbound click trigger that we created. And of course, let's call it something. So store cookies. Of course, you can name other cookies as well. And just to pay attention, there's no values of the cookies that you need to pass. You just need to reference them by name, and the tag will do everything for you. So I've mentioned underscore FBC, which is Facebook click ID, and I'm going to hit save on this. Okay, now let's see that in action, I guess, right? So we can launch our preview on Stape events this time. I don't really need the web preview because we can do it just live. So let's do exactly that. Let's just wait for this to load. Oh, yeah, and I already have this prepared for you guys. Oh, okay. Always happens. Too many redirects, of course. All right. Now our preview is working. So here's what we're going to do. Let's just double check that we're getting events. Yes, beautiful. Now let's set ourselves with a cookie. So I'm just doing FB cleared test, which sets a cookie right here. I have my FBC, there's a timestamp and test one. Obviously, this is my click ID for the purposes of this exercise. So that sets a cookie. Now we're going to do a outbound click, right? Which has triggered, or should have triggered at least, an outbound click tag. And that has not been the case. All right, let's see why it wasn't the case. Our outbound click is here. Click URL contains Stape beer. That's the thing. So we should have received it. Okay, let's launch this in preview then and see what's up. Maybe I did a typo somewhere. That has happened before, so wouldn't be a surprise. Okay, now that we're here, let's do that outbound click. And in our GTM, a link click has succeeded and was sent to our server container properly. This is here. And our Stapes, our restore tag has fired. You can see there's a GA cookie. Again, we can pick it with a native variable, this, because we have it in the headers of our request, because this is all first party, right? So this is our GA 7444. We already kind of looked at that. There's also my FBC cookie, right, with a test one, which is beautiful. So what the tag did here is it stored in our Stape store an identifier Oh, like this, sorry. So it's stored an FBC cookie. It's actually also stored an FBP cookie. And there's my G4 for a key. You don't have to deal with this structure. This is internal. This was built for a purpose like that, complicated object nesting. But the point is, we have saved our cookies like this, right? And we could even go to like Stape Store and just like find them in the UI, but we know they're there. Now we need to do the second part. The second part being, when we land here, we want to restore those cookies, right? So I want ultimately to have the same FBC, which is test one, on Stape Beer. So let's do that. Let's close our preview for now. We're gonna be back soon, but don't need it right now. Okay, so we already have an outbound click event. What we want to do is uh, catch the fact that we landed on State Beer with this GL. And this is simple enough of a flag. We want to see if there's any page view that is with this parameter, with the Google linker. We would know then that this is our clue to, do the magic. Of course, in reality, in real cases, you may have more flags than just GL, right? Because I imagine the kind of movement from one domain to another would have certain URL patterns. You would know which pages you're sending them to. So I'm just saying there might be more flags that will scream to you that you need, that you need to trigger some tags. But in any case, this is a page view, right? And we have a GL. So we don't really even need to create a new thing on the web container because we already are sending page views. So we're just going to handle it on the server. And in here, we will be just looking at the page location, right? So let's go ahead and look at the triggers. And I already have one, but we have DC page view. This is a normal page view event, but I'm saying whenever event data page location contains question mark underscore GL equals, which is exactly our flag here, right? Whenever, apologies, close that up. Misclicks our thing. Whenever we have that, this is our clue to do our magic. So let's go back here and create a copy of this. And let's say restore cookies. So important part, I'm going to check this checkbox. It will prevent writing cookies to Firestore. We'll update the tip. It's not Firestore in this case, but useful if you want to sync cookies between sites only in one direction, right? And this is the case with us. We only want to pass the cookie from A to B. We don't want them to be circularly, we don't want that like circle dependency. One restores the other at all times. So we only want the restore cookies for this specific case. And of course, I'm going to change the outbound click to actually be page view with cross domain. Now, here, I already talked about flags, but not only you may have other flags and such, you could limit it by say domain, right? Because I'm doing this in a very isolated example. I have my two dummy domains. I know what's happening, but you may want to be more cautious and just make sure that you narrow down the trigger cases only to your situation, not to have some unexpected behavior and unexpected cookie restorations and such. So yeah, be mindful here, and of course, always test your setups. So we have done that. We have the same everything here. We're going to look at the GA cookie, right? We discussed it. Due to the linker, we will already have the same GA cookie in our destination domain. So by the time we receive a page view like that, we will have the same cookie value, which, across domains, and that works as our matching key. And then there's FBC, like I said. So let's save this and let's actually test it. So we already tested the first part. We're passing everything and we're getting the GA cookie here. So why don't we launch the preview on beer now, like this, so that we see the server, you know, the event we're looking for from state beer from destination domain. And here we can probably launch Stape events. Yeah, I'm thinking that will do. So, okay. So again, I am here on my Stape events, domain A. I'm going to click this thing, be redirected to Stape beer with a bunch of linker parameters. At this point in time, let's look at our server. Our server, we're launched the preview on Stape beer, has claimed those requests, right? This is our normal page view. You can see restore cookies have fired. It has fired, of course, because the page location contains that flag that we talked about, the linker parameter. Now, what has happened here is we have gone ahead, found this thing in the Stape store, and restored the same FBC parameter with test1. So let's quickly take a look what's happening here. If we look at the cookies, oops, if we look at the cookies on Stape beer, I will have my FBC with test1 set on Stape beer domain as a first party cookie. And I still have the same on Stape events, of course. So now, in reality, in the wild, if I were to convert here, I would, of course, be attributed because I have my click ID. So there you go, guys. This is, in the nutshell, the demonstration of how you can restore cookies across domains. So to recap, you need some sort of a stitching agent. You need to kind of connect A to B somehow. And in this case, we use GE4. Like I said, the similar principle can be applied without Google Analytics. You can just do it with some custom code. And that will take care of part one. Part two, you just need Stape. You need the cookie restore template that we offer and your server-side container, and you are done. Of course, you can do not just FBC like I showed you. You can do any other cookies you want. But in this scenario, Google Analytics is already taken care of, and we pretty much care about conversions here mostly. So probably you would be doing something like this, the click ID for Google Ads, right? And then again, use the same lifetime in seconds. Assuming you use the server-side conversion linker by Google Ads, this will be the cookie with your click ID. The same situation as FBC will follow. And then all of your other cookies you have in mind, there's TikTok, there's Twitter. I don't remember if that's the correct naming. But anyway, that's beyond the point. The principle and the mechanism has been shown to you. So now you guys can run multi-tenant containers, and you can also do some cross-domain exercise to face whatever challenges your customers are throwing at you. So thank you for the attention today. As usual, we're going to send a follow-up with a recording and some useful guides. And yeah, stay tuned for our other webinars. I'll see you roughly in a month on the next one. Thank you very much. Bye.